Hi, welcome to the New Teacher Academy at Vineland Public Schools. My name is Ross Stanger, and I'm going to be providing you an overview of the observation and analysis of teaching model that we use here in Vineland that's prescribed by Charlotte Danielson. Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching is based off of 4 domains, and those domains are planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibilities. Before I go any further, I'd like to share with you the link to where our district curricula are located, in case you're looking for them. And they can be accessed just by clicking all the links right in the presentation. So there it is. And Vineland's evaluation rubric is based off of 19 different indicators. And there are 4 potential ratings for each of those indicators, and they are unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished. And the idea behind this rubric is hopefully that you will have a growth mindset as you approach your teaching, with the idea that you will want to be looking to improve off of any rating that you receive from the year before, based on some feedback that you'll receive from the people who observe you. And with that in mind, anyone in our administration can observe you. By that I mean any supervisor, your school principal, or your assistant principal. So you should expect to be observed by one of those 3 people. And at the same time, we use the Encore system for observations. So that's where we will schedule observations for you, and that's also where you will go later after the observation to sign the observations and so forth. And the Encore system is right here, and it looks like this, and you will be receiving your username and password at the training, so you should be able to see that with no trouble and get in. And when you get into the rubric, this is what it looks like. And as I said, you'll note that it's based off of 4 domains. Domain 1 is planning and preparation. You can see an exact replica of a blank observation here. And you'll note that all of the domain 1 components are listed over here, 1A, 2, 3, and so forth. So they're located in the left-hand column. And then in the right columns over here are the 4 potential ratings. And the thing that I would like to point out to you as you look at this, I'd like you to pay attention to keywords. I'm not obviously going to read every single box, but some of the keywords in each of the columns, for example, would refer to does not correct errors made by students, little to no understanding of the content for here, low expectations, or do not reflect important learning. For example, learning activities are not suitable, not designed to engage students, and not congruent. So those are basically no, not present, not there, not good enough, etc. When you get into the basic category, it's basically indicating that some of the components are there that we're looking for, but not quite all of them, or not to the degree maybe that we're looking for. So for example, you'll see you're familiar with important concepts, but you're not maybe displaying awareness of how they relate to one another. Or some of your practices are okay in terms of your pedagogy, but some of them are not suitable. Some of your outcomes are there, but they may be of low rigor and expectations for the students. And again, some of the activities are okay, but they're only a moderate challenge, and there's really no differentiation for students, meaning it's all the same activity for everyone. And here, again, some are assessed, but some are not. And by the time you get over to proficient, that's really where you're doing exactly what we're asking you to do, and you're doing it successfully. And generally speaking, in the teacher's rubric, this is where you should expect to see the great majority of your elements and components. In the proficient range, Occasionally, you'll be able to visit the distinguished category if you do something that's completely exemplary. But for the most part, like I said, expect proficient, with the idea that, again, you're doing a solid job, and for the most part, things here are generally dictated by the teacher. So let me show you example of how that looks and how that works. So when you're in this, your knowledge is strong. You're explaining how each concept relates to another. The difference, meaning, is that there's extensive knowledge of not just one content, but the last clause in here explains it specifically, how you're linking the concepts of one content to another content. Here you're talking about the plans and practices, and you're doing everything successfully and everything works. Here you're sort of heading off questions and heading off problems and student questions even before they come up. Here again, everything is successful and you're connecting everything to a sequence of learning properly, but here you're doing it with another discipline in mind and so forth. So that's Domain 1, planning and preparation. Domain 2 deals with the classroom environment. And Domains 2 and 3 are those two domains that your supervisors or principal or assistant principal can observe when they go into the classroom. They may not necessarily be able to specifically observe you planning and preparing for your lesson. Those are things that kind of go on behind the scenes. But when it comes to the classroom environment, we can specifically see exactly what's going on. And by that, we're looking for teacher interaction with students, expectations for learning and achievement, the management of transitions and movement through the classroom, expectations, and how you respond to student misbehavior. So those are the components, the 5 things within Domain 2, the classroom environment. And again, the wording is basically set up the same way as in Domain 1, where it's really not present or not good enough. Here, getting there, you're doing everything perfect, everything successfully in proficient and in distinguished. What you'll find is that the major difference between proficient and distinguished is that the students are the ones who are really taking control of the classroom. The students appear to trust the teacher with sensitive information. That's something you can observe. The students have internalized your expectations. The students are the ones who are helping the class transition effectively between things or activities into or out of the classroom. Standards of conduct have been created with students, and so on and so forth. Domain 3 is, again, another one of those things that your administrator can come in and see in the classroom. The components there are your ability to explain the content, your use of oral and written language, the quality of your questions, your discussion techniques, your activities and assignments, and the assessment criteria that you use. And for here, as far as your explanation of content, the major difference between proficient and distinguished is that you have students contributing to explaining concepts to their peers, as opposed to you doing a successful job of delivering that content. When it comes to the use of oral and written language, you're finding opportunities to extend student vocabulary with really high-level vocabulary that's going to enrich the lesson, as opposed to all the vocabulary and language being correct. In terms of the quality of questions, all your questions are good, versus here, your questions and discussions are so good, or the class is set up in such a way so that the students are formulating many questions. When it comes to discussion techniques, again, the students are the ones who are assuming considerable responsibility for the discussion and bringing up lots of topics, as opposed to everything being handled through you, the teacher, as far as facilitating the discussion. And when it comes to activities and assignments, just about everything is working well here in terms of your activities and assignments. Everything is successful, high rigor and whatnot, but by the time you get over here to distinguished, The students are the ones who are taking the initiative and the onus upon themselves to initiate or adapt those activities and projects to enhance their own understanding. And finally, when it comes to the assessment criteria, your assessment criteria is good here. Students are aware of it. It's rigorous and whatnot and clear. But by the time you get over here, the students are the ones who have contributed to the development of the criteria in advance. And, one way to do that, for example, might be to have the students take a look at work from a prior year that you might have, or from a colleague if they have done this particular assignment. Or you could have the students look at that criteria and also then help develop it based upon the standards that they think meet the standards that you need for the various levels in terms of what should earn them an A, a B, etc. Domain 4 is the last of the 4 domains, and this is one again that deals with something outside of what we can see when we walk into a classroom. The first one deals with reflecting on teaching. Number 18 deals with communicating with families. And number 19 deals with growing and developing professionally. So within those, the thing I always like to tell teachers is that if there's one thing that I would suggest that you try to do as a new teacher that's going to take you from good to great, it's to try to reflect on your practice every single day. And by that, whether you make a diary, whether you jot down notes, whether you think about things in the car, on your ride home, however you handle the reflection is up to you. But the main thing that I would suggest is think about what you did, take some brief notes as to what worked well and what didn't, and what you would like to see happen the next time that you look at that lesson. Whether it be the next day, the next week, even the next year, you'll have those notes and those thoughts in your head about what you would do differently. But the more you're able to reflect on your own practice, I would argue that the better chance you'll have of being successful in the future. Number 18 deals with communicating with families. And during the COVID shutdown, it's certainly going to be important to communicate with families as best you can. We're suggesting 3 different office hours for this year, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one at night to try to reach out to families. But it's just always a great practice, whether there's a pandemic or not, to make sure that you're communicating with families as best you can, and just making sure that the parents are abreast of all the different developments in the classroom, and so they understand how they can help their child. The last one deals with professional development, which is a little bit interesting this year during the pandemic, but in the future, I believe that professional development is extremely important, and you can get that professional development through a myriad of different ways, whether it be something on the web or something in person. But the premise behind number 19 in terms of your rubric and what we are asking you to do is, are you seeking out professional development for yourself? And if you are, and if you're welcoming feedback from your colleagues and supervisors, that's going to get you the proficient category. The way to earn the distinguished category is to come over here, and if you see, you're not only pursuing the professional development for yourself, but you're sharing your knowledge with others. And that's the way that you're really helping others grow in terms of contributing to the profession. And that's really what we're looking for. So as you take a look at the rubric, if you have a little bit of time by yourself, I encourage you to take note of the specifics within each rating, to take a note for yourself so that you understand where your supervisor or principal is coming from when they discuss your rubric with you later on. Now, what to expect in a normal world. This year, we're still waiting to hear from the state of New Jersey, and when I say this year, it's 2020. We're still waiting to hear from the state of New Jersey about what's going to happen with observations. But in a normal world, when we return to normal, non-tenured teachers like you are going to get 3 observations from your supervisors. One is going to be announced through Genesis, or I'm sorry, through OnCourse rather. So you'll know that your supervisor or principal is coming in, and they'll set up a pre-conference with you, and then you'll know when the observation is coming after the pre-conference. 2 of these are going to be unannounced. So a principal or supervisor will just come into your classroom and observe you, and you won't know that they're coming. Tenured teachers, it's a little bit different. You'll note that the number of observations goes down from 3 to 2. 1 is announced and 1 is unannounced. And in the right-hand column, it explains it to you a little bit. You'll have 1 with a pre-conference, whether you're tenured or non-tenured. Each observation will have a post-conference, so expect 3 post-conferences. And again, any administrator, meaning supervisor, principal, or assistant principal, can observe you regardless of the grade level or the content areas. All right, and in some cases, you will even have 2 administrators present. It's possible that you'll have 2 people. It's not frequent, it's not often, but dual observations are set up for inter-rater reliability so that administrators are trained and constantly talking about what we see in the same observation. And the way that those observations work is that you'll meet with 1 person for the pre-conference. If there is a pre-conference, you'll have 2 people there for the observation, and then you'll have 2 people there for the post-conference. And if the 2 administrators have 2 different scores, meaning 1 is distinguished and 1 is proficient, you will receive the higher score for that particular component of the observation for any of those components where the scores differ. And again, in a normal world, you will have a summative rating as well that's based on more than just your observation rubrics. And by that, what I mean is part of your rating that goes to the state of New Jersey will be based on your teacher practice, which is your observation scores. And part of your rating will come from another one of 2 areas, which is called student growth objective. And what happens with that is all teachers have 2 what are called SGOs, which are student growth objectives. Those are things that are set by the teacher at the beginning of the year as far as goals that you would like your students to meet during the course of the year, and they are approved by the principal. They are to be tiered, and they're going to be based on multiple measures. And what I mean by that is you'll break down your class or your classes into groups, and you will base those tiers, as we call them, on multiple measures, which could include but aren't necessarily limited to attendance data from the year before, standardized test data from the year before, grades from the year before, reading levels from the year before, and so on and so forth. And the idea is you're using multiple different types of data. You are using multiple tiers so that your highest level students in the class, you would expect to have the same level of growth as you would for students at the bottom. It's just based on where they're starting and where they're ending, if that makes sense. What basically, and you can see a little example here of a math problem in terms of how things are set up. Part of it is based on teacher practice. You add in, which is a percentage, you add in the percentage for the student growth objective. You may add in a percentage for what's called the SGP, and that is for teachers in grades 4 to 8 and language arts, and 4 through 7 in math. And by the time you add up all 3 of those factors, you reach the summative rating. Again, just to review, most of it is based on teacher practice. Some of it is going to be based on the student growth objective. And for some teachers, they will have a student growth percentile, which is an SGP. The teachers down here are the only ones who have the student growth percentile. And when you add all 3 of those up, if 3 are needed, then you get your summative rating, and that's what gets submitted to the state of New Jersey. This is what it looks like from back in 2016-17, an example of what that looks like, where teacher practice was the lion's share of the teacher rating, and the SGO was the other 15%. So for example, if I was a social studies teacher, this is what my rating would, how my rating would be calculated. 85% would come from my 2 or 3 observations, and 15% would come from my SGOs. So more or less 7.5% from each SGO, and that's it. And that's the majority of teachers who are working. If you are, again, a teacher in grades 4 through 8 for language arts, or 4 through 7 in math, you would have had an MSGP, median student growth percentile. Those percentages, you'll note, are a little bit different. The percentage of teacher practice went down by 30% and started at 55%. The SGOs, again, were about 7.5 percentage points each for a combined total of 15%. And the MSGP came to 30%. When you added all those up, you got your score and your rating from there. There is a calculator to help you in here if you need help with completing your rating. The last slide just deals with teacher questions, and you can certainly reach out to me, Ross Stanger, if you have questions, or any of your administrators, whether it be your principal, assistant principal, me, or another supervisor. If you have any questions at all about any of the information related to your rubric or anything else that I've discussed today, we want you to be successful, and we really want to make sure that you understand everything before you get observed. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. One of the things that I was reminded about was, we really want to make sure that you're successful, and we want to know that we want you to know that we care about you greatly. And it's very similar to the classroom environment that we want you to be creating with your students. But there's a great quote by Maya Angelou that says that people will forget a lot of different things, but they won't forget how you made them feel. And we encourage you to try to set up your classroom environment so that the students know that you care about them, whether it's in a virtual environment or whether it's in a physical environment, whether it's in a cohort or what have you. But we really want to emphasize that you create a wonderful and warm and enriching classroom environment for your students. And as administrators, we want to do the same with you, our new teachers. Please don't hesitate to call on any of us at any time, because we really want you to be successful. And with that, we are done. But thank you very much. Best wishes and good luck.